A 6-year CBS News investigation is leading to life-saving improvements in vehicle safety laws. CBS News' Kris Van Cleave spoke to the family who sparked this change. His story aired on CBS News Mornings Tuesday. Kris joins me today to discuss what he learned from the investigation and the family at the center of it. Thank you so much for taking some time today, Kris. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Your investigation revealed crash test after crash test showed the front seat of dozens of vehicles collapsing into the back, leading to many likely unnecessary deaths of children in the back seat. Why hadn't this been addressed before?
Well, it certainly wasn't that people didn't know about it. We would learn that a well-regarded crash investigator had filed a petition with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, notifying them of a problem and asking for a change in the strength standard back in 1989. And it went nowhere, even after he went on 60 Minutes and talked with Ed Bradley in 1992 about this issue. We learned in 2000, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration administrator told CBS News that this was a standard that needed to change. A couple of years later, NHTSA abandoned their research on looking for a better standard. So why hadn't it changed? That was one of the things that we just found baffling. And when I say we, I mean myself and producer Megan Toohey, as we were reading into this, as we were learning about these accidents, it was really one of those things where you kept seeing examples of it and well-documented proof that people knew there was a problem, and then no action.
Then the Warners, a family that you met several years ago, and as you explain in your story, they lost their 16-month-old daughter due to a collapsing front seat after a rear-end crash. Tell me a little bit more about your relationship with Andy and Liz.
Well, so Megan, the producer, and I had been researching this for much of 2015, and we felt like we had a good story here, but what we didn't have was someone who had experienced this situation that wanted to talk about it. Part of that is because when there would be an accident that would go lead to a lawsuit, they tended to be settled, and then there'd be non-disclosure agreements in place. Automakers didn't really want these cases, it seemed, going to trial and going into the public record. But the Warners, Liz had created a Facebook group to try to warn people, to inform people about this hidden danger. And it all centers around a strength standard that the regulators have created that even a banquet chair can pass. And that's really the problem. What we found was that the seats on the roads met or exceeded the federal standard for how strong they needed to be. That federal standard was outdated. It's 54 years old. Think about all of the things that have changed in vehicle safety in 54 years. We're talking about seatbelts, we're talking about airbags, we're talking about emergency automatic braking. But this standard hasn't been modernized in half a century. We came upon Liz's Facebook page, and that's how our conversation with the Warners started. Fortunately for all of us, Liz and Andy decided to take a very brave step and publicly talk about their pain on national television. And it was 5 years after they'd lost Taylor, and it was still extremely raw for Liz and Andy. They had young children, and every day they put their kids in the car, they thought about the day they lost Taylor.
It's just, a really tragic start to this story with an ending that hopefully leads to safety measures preventing these kinds of stories from happening again. And I want to talk about that next, because the infrastructure bill signed into law by President Joe Biden this week affects the safety standards for new vehicles. So what's going to happen now moving forward?
So we were very fortunate that Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts happened to be watching our stories when they ran in 2015. And he was deeply bothered by what he saw. He and Senator Richard Blumenthal then sent letters to all of the automakers asking for information about these crashes. They also asked NHTSA about these crashes. What they got were responses that they felt were unsatisfactory. So they wrote a law. It took 2 tries to get the law introduced and considered. It passed the House earlier this year when Kathleen Rice learned about the situation, again from our reporting. And then it was incorporated into the infrastructure bill. And basically what it says now is that regulators have to create a new strength standard for vehicle seats in the next 2 years. And then it's up to the Secretary of Transportation to approve that standard, and then it can be implemented. What we know is that this is a solvable problem. Automakers have said in depositions that the estimated cost to fix this problem is on the order of $1 or so. We know of at least 3 car makers, BMW, Mercedes, and Volvo, that have strengthened their seats without impacting, without creating other safety concerns. They were aware of the problem the same way the rest of the auto industry is aware of it. It shows up in crash tests whenever you do a rear end crash test. So we know it's a solvable problem. We know some automakers have fixed it. So now there is real pressure on the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to update their standard. And then, we will, of course, stay on that, as will Senator Markey and Senator Blumenthal and Representative Rice and others. And then hopefully the Secretary of Transportation approves the proposed new standard, and this becomes real in about 2 years.
All right, Kris, is there anything else that I haven't asked you about this story? I'm glad that you touched on that $1 aspect of it, because that was something I found very profound in your reporting, that automakers clearly said it's $1 to improve in each vehicle.
And let's say it's a little bit more than $1 or so. Let's say in the time since that statement was made, it's $5 a seat. When you're talking about the average vehicle in this country costing tens of thousands of dollars, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $20, $100 more isn't really something that's going to prevent somebody from being able to get into that vehicle. So it is a solvable problem. Andy Warner told us, seeing this bill signed into law as the person who was driving the car that day, and it's something that plays in his mind every day, he felt like it took some weight off of his shoulders, because now there's a real concrete step to something being done. And, we're going to have to keep watching. We're not done reporting on this issue because now the regulator has to do their job, and we plan to hold them accountable to that. And even after it's done and there's a new standard, you'll have all of those cars on the roads that don't have the stronger seats. So the danger is still going to be there for years to come, and we've got to keep watching that. And I think the question often I'll get when one of these stories runs is, so what's the best thing to do? Where do you put your kids? We've talked to safety experts and crash experts about this extensively. They tell us is, if possible, shift the child over to behind the passenger seat if that seat is empty, because an empty seat is far less likely to collapse, and if it does, won't have the force of a human being's weight. The other thing to think about is perhaps in the middle of the back seat. The other thing to know, the strength standard for seat belts is far more than vehicle seats. So if you have a vehicle, and you see this in a lot of SUVs, where in that back row, the middle seat has a seat belt embedded in the seat, that's a really strong seat. That seat's not going to move because the strength standard for the seat belt is so much higher. So the seat has already been built to that standard. So that's a good place to consider also.
Well, Kris, I want to thank you so much, not only just for your reporting, because I think, this brings ease of mind to so many parents who are thinking about their child. I mean, every parent thinks about their child in the backseat anytime they get into a car, but this extra added level of safety that was brought to so many Americans' attention because of your reporting. I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank you for taking some time to break this down for us, break the whole investigation down for us today. It was really great talking to you.
Really, thanks for having me.
You can watch Kris Van Cleave's full report right now at cbsnews.com. I'm Katie Johnston for CBS Local News.